There are levels to petty. You've got your standard garden variety petty, like leaving a single inconvenient item in your shopping cart at the express checkout or using the last of the coffee and not starting a new pot. It's annoying, but ultimately forgettable. Then you have your advanced pettiness, the kind that requires planning and dedication, like deliberately parking over the line to take up 2 spots or accidentally watering your neighbor's freshly washed car. That's graduate-level stuff, requiring a certain commitment to being a nuisance. And then, far beyond all that, in a dimension of its own, there's Carol Peterson. Carol, the duly elected, iron-fisted president of the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association, operated on a level of pettiness so cosmic, so profound, it might just be capable of bending space-time around its own gravitational field of sheer, unadulterated grievance. She didn't just practice pettiness, she was a virtuoso, a grandmaster. I should know. I was her magnum opus, her favorite project. And it all came to a head on a Tuesday afternoon, with a piece of crisp linen blend paper in my hand, trembling not with fear, but with a rage so pure it was almost holy. I was sitting on my own meticulously manicured lawn, a patch of fescue grass so perfect it looked like a CGI rendering, staring at the official notice. Maple Creek Estates, my home for the past year, was a kingdom of beige conformity. The houses were beige, the fences were beige, the curbs were beige. The neighborhood motto, printed in a tasteful beige-adjacent font on the welcome sign, was, "A community of harmony." What it really meant was, a community of compulsory sameness. My job is different. I own and operate Apex Restoration Bioremediation Services. The name is intentionally corporate and boring, designed to be palatable on an invoice. What it really means is that I'm the guy you call when things have gone spectacularly, horribly wrong. I clean up the messes no one else wants to touch. Crime scenes, unattended deaths, hoarder houses that have achieved sentience, industrial chemical spills, catastrophic black mold infestations that look like an alien terraforming project. It's a messy, often grim, but incredibly lucrative business. It's also made me a little cynical, very good at compartmentalizing, and has given me access to a warehouse full of seriously cool, high-tech gear and a small, loyal, and slightly unhinged crew who I'd trust with my life. I love my job. Every day is a new form of chaos, and I get to be the calm, competent guy who wades in and makes it right. My home life in Maple Creek was supposed to be the antidote to that, the serene, orderly, boring, polar opposite. At least, that was the idea. But I hadn't factored in Carol. Carol, a woman in her late 50s with a haircut you could set your watch to and eyes that seemed to be permanently narrowed in disapproval, had made me her personal crusade from the moment my moving truck had the audacity to crush a single blade of community-owned grass. The notice in my hand was the latest in a long, illustrious line of correspondence. It was a highlight reel of her particular brand of lunacy. There was the improperly spaced shrubbery violation from last May, where she'd come out with a tape measure and determined my boxwoods were staging a slow-motion rebellion against the approved 18-inch grid pattern. She'd included a diagram. Then came the excessive holiday cheer citation in December. I'd put up a single, elegant string of white Christmas lights along the eaves of my roof. I put them up on December 23rd and took them down on the 27th. According to Carol, this was a garish affront to the neighborhood's understated elegance and a flagrant violation of the seasonal decorum statutes. My personal favorite, until today, was the unsanctioned avian gathering notice. My daughter had given me a small bird feeder for my birthday. Apparently, it attracted more than the HOA-approved limit of 3 finches at any given time, creating what Carol termed a public nuisance and potential biohazard. I had to draft a formal bird dispersal action plan. I am not making this up, but this new notice, the one I held now, was her masterpiece. It was a formal fine for my mailbox. Not its size, not its location, not its structural integrity, its color. A month ago, I'd received a warning that the paint was fading. So, being a good little suburbanite, I took the official HOA color swatch a shade called Subtle Taupe, code MC $734 to a professional paint store. I had them mix a gallon of the most durable outdoor enamel money could buy, and I gave the mailbox 3 beautiful, even coats. It was perfect. The notice in my hand, complete with several glossy close-up photographs taken from different angles as evidence, claimed I had not, in fact, used subtle taupe. I had, with malicious forethought, used desert sand, a color that was a few molecules off from the approved shade, and had been explicitly banned in the 2019 Bylaws Revision, Appendix C, Subsection 4. I read the justification aloud, my voice dripping with disbelief. The reflective qualities of desert sand are known to cause temporary glare during peak sunlight hours, 3:15 p.m., 3:45 p.m., posing a potential distraction to passing motorists and a significant disruption to the neighborhood's visual harmony. A significant disruption? Carol, it's a 4x4 metal box on a stick. The only thing it's disrupting is my will to live. The notice informed me I had 48 hours to strip the offending paint and recoat the mailbox in the correct shade of taupe. Failure to comply would result in a daily, non-negotiable fine of $100. It was signed, in a flourish of passive-aggressive calligraphy, Carol Peterson, President, HOA. Staring at that piece of paper, a switch flipped in my brain. The part of me that just wanted a quiet life shorted out, and the part of me that deals with hazardous waste and utter chaos for a living took the helm. I was done being a good neighbor. I was done trying to appease the Queen of Beige. If she wanted compliance, I was going to give her a level of compliance she would never, ever forget. The next afternoon, the sun was high and hot, casting long shadows across the unnaturally green lawns of Maple Creek Estates. And there I was, in the heart of it all, waging my own private ridiculous war. If Carol wanted compliance, I would deliver compliance with surgical, infuriating precision. I wasn't just going to repaint the mailbox. I was going to turn the act of repainting a mailbox into a piece of performance art so mind-numbingly pedantic that it would haunt her dreams. I went to my garage and retrieved the can of subtle taupe, the very same one I'd used before, but I didn't grab a standard paintbrush or a roller. Oh no. I went to the workbench where I keep my modeling supplies and selected a set of tiny, artist-grade brushes, the kind you use to paint the eyeballs on a miniature space marine. I also brought out a roll of delicate painter's tape, a magnifying lamp, and a cotton swab. I set up my little station on the grass next to the mailbox. I spent a full 10 minutes taping off the little red flag, the hinges on the door, and the manufacturer's embossed logo. I was treating this metal box like I was about to restore the Sistine Chapel. I put on safety goggles and a pair of nitrile gloves from my work kit. I wanted the full effect of absurd professionalism. I had just dipped the tip of my finest 3-bristle brush into the can when a shadow fell over me. I didn't need to look up. I could feel the psychic aura of disapproval. It was Carol. She'd materialized, as she always did, in full power-walking gear Lululemon from head to toe, a visor pulled down low, and a look of grim satisfaction on her face. She thought she'd won. "Mark," she said, her voice dripping with the smugness of a predator who has cornered its prey. "I see you've received my notice." I didn't look up. I continued to apply a microscopic amount of paint to the edge of the mailbox door, my tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. "Carol," I said, my voice level. "Couldn't miss it. The shade of fuchsia you used for the final warning stamp was a bit loud, don't you think? Might violate the pastel tones only stationery directive on page 47 of the bylaws. Just looking out for you." A muscle in her jaw twitched. "There's no need for sarcasm, Mark. I am simply ensuring our community standards are upheld for the benefit of everyone who lives here." "Right," I replied, leaning closer to my work. Because my mailbox was clearly seconds away from causing a chain reaction collapse of property values across the entire zip code. It's a miracle no one's had to foreclose yet. The horror. Her eyes, sharp and critical, narrowed as they focused on my setup. The tiny brushes, the magnifying lamp, my intense focus. The gears in her hyper-vigilant brain started to turn. "What? What are you doing?" she asked, a note of suspicion creeping into her voice. "Are you mocking the process?" I finally looked up at her, pushing my safety goggles up onto my forehead. I gave her my most sincere, earnest look. Mocking? Carol, this is the opposite of mocking. This is respect. This is dedication. I am ensuring that every square millimeter of this galvanized steel prison conforms to your exact vision. The notice said repaint. It didn't specify the tools or the timeline. I'm using a 3-bristle brush for the edges to ensure a crisp, clean line with no bleed over. The attention to detail is, and I quote the bylaws on architectural standards, exemplary. She was flustered. This wasn't the reaction she'd expected. She wanted me to be angry, to be sloppy, to argue. She didn't have a protocol for dealing with maliciously cheerful compliance. "You think this is a joke?" she said, her voice getting tighter. "People like you move in here. You with your biohazard truck." She spat the words out like they were poison. "And you think the rules don't apply to you. You think you can just do whatever you want." "I want to check my mail, Carol," I said, turning back to my masterpiece. "And maybe live in a world where the specific hue of my mailbox doesn't trigger a neighborhood-wide security alert. Is that really so much to ask?" That was it. I had pushed her past her breaking point. She was no longer in control of the situation, and for a control freak like Carol, that was the ultimate sin. Her face went from pink to a dangerous shade of crimson. Her carefully constructed veneer of calm authority cracked right down the middle. "This is about more than mailboxes," she hissed, her voice dropping to a low, menacing whisper that was genuinely unsettling. "This is about respect for the system, about order. Some things," she said, taking a step closer, "need to be cut down to size to maintain that order. Some people need to be taught a lesson about how fragile their little, comfortable world really is." She paused, letting the words hang in the hot, still air. A permanent lesson. And with that, she spun on her heel and power walked away, her arms pumping furiously. She didn't look back. I stood there for a long moment, the tiny brush still in my hand, a dab of subtle taupe drying on its tip. Part of me was amused. Part of me was genuinely unnerved. It was an incredibly bizarre and disproportionate threat. But I figured it was just the impotent rage of a petty tyrant who had finally been outmaneuvered. I finished the mailbox. I gave it a flawless, beautiful, and aggressively compliant coat of paint. I cleaned my brushes, packed up my station, and went inside, thinking that was the end of it. I was, of course, very, very wrong. 2 hours later, the drama of the mailbox war had faded. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple that were almost certainly not on the HOA-approved color palette. I was in my home office, a sanctuary of organized calm, catching up on paperwork from a particularly gruesome hoarder house cleanup we'd handled last week. The job had involved 3 tons of garbage, a mummified cat, and a smell I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Not even Carol. Okay, maybe Carol. That's when I first noticed it. A faint, pungent, and deeply unnatural odor. I sniffed the air. Did I leave the gas on? The thought was immediate, but I dismissed it just as quickly. I'm a meticulous person, a side effect of a job where forgetting a step can have serious consequences. I never leave the gas on. I walked out of my office and into the kitchen. The smell was stronger here. It was the unmistakable scent of mercaptan, the sulfur-based chemical that gas companies add to naturally odorless natural gas. It's the smell of danger, the alarm bell that screams something is very wrong. A cold dread, mixed with a healthy dose of, "You have got to be kidding me," started to creep up my spine. My professional instincts, honed by years of walking into hazardous environments, began to fire off warning signals in my brain. I checked the knobs on my stove, all off. The pilot light was on, a steady blue flame. The problem wasn't in the house. I opened the back door leading to my patio, and the smell hit me like a physical blow. It was thick, acrid, and overwhelming. This wasn't a small leak from a loose fitting. This was a major, catastrophic release. My mind immediately started calculating ignition sources, the air conditioner compressor kicking on, a static spark from someone's shoes, a pilot light, and a water heater. The air on my block was quickly becoming a giant, invisible bomb. I walked quickly, purposefully, to the side of my house where the gas meter was located, tucked behind a row of now perfectly compliant shrubbery. And there it was. The evidence of Carol's permanent lesson. The soft copper pipe that led from the main gas line in the ground to my meter had been cut. It wasn't broken, it wasn't rusted through, it wasn't damaged by a careless landscaper. It was a clean, precise snip, the kind of cut you get from a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters. The gas was hissing out, loud and steady, into the evening air. I stared at it, my mind struggling to process the sheer, unmitigated insanity of the act. This wasn't petty anymore. This wasn't about bylaws or mailboxes. This was a felony. This was attempted arson on a neighborhood-wide scale. As I stood there in stunned disbelief, a figure caught my eye down the street. It was Carol. She was finishing her second power walk of the day, moving with a brisk, triumphant rhythm. She was too far away to see my face, but I could see hers. She was glowing with smug satisfaction. And dangling from her right hand, swinging in time with her steps and catching the last glint of the setting sun, was a pair of bright yellow, heavy-duty bolt cutters. She saw me looking. She didn't flinch. She didn't try to hide them. She lifted her hand in a small, smug little wave, a gesture of victory. That's when the final, horrifying piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The clang was so loud in my head it was almost audible. Her threat, the rage, the bolt cutters. She didn't just cut my gas line. My heart pounding, I started moving. I walked quickly down the sidewalk, my professional gaze scanning the side of each house. The Hendersons' place next door? Their meter was in a small alcove near their garage. I peered in, snipped. The hissing was fainter, but it was there. The Garcias' house, 2 doors down? Snipped. The quiet, elderly couple at the end of the cul-de-sac? Snipped. She had cut the gas lines for the entire block. My block. She had armed our quiet, beige little street with enough explosive potential to level us back to the Stone Age. I stood in the middle of the street, the air growing thicker with every passing second. And in that moment, my brain bypassed all the normal, rational responses. My first thought wasn't, call 911. It wasn't call the gas company. It wasn't even, I'm going to sue her into oblivion. My first thought, which arrived fully formed, crystal clear, and glowing with a divine, beautiful, and frankly terrifying inspiration, was this. Oh, you have declared war, my good lady, but you brought bolt cutters to a hazmat fight. Panic is for amateurs. Panic is what the client does while you're calmly assessing the situation and formulating a plan. Panic is what happens when you don't have a 10 square foot warehouse stocked with the solution to almost any conceivable disaster. In my line of work, panic is a liability. What I felt, standing there in the middle of a street that was rapidly becoming a fuel-air bomb, wasn't panic. It was clarity. It was a glorious, righteous, and slightly unhinged sense of purpose. The universe had just handed me a stage, a clear and present danger, a mustache-twirling villain, and a full-blown hazardous materials situation that fell squarely within my professional purview. It would have been rude not to put on a show. I whipped out my phone, my fingers flying across the screen. I didn't dial 911. The police and fire department would show up eventually. They were the supporting cast. I was the producer, director, and star of this particular production. I speed-dialed my crew chief, Dave. Dave picked up on the second ring, the sound of him crunching on what was probably a chili cheese Frito clear through the speaker. Apex, Dave speaking. Dave, I said, my voice low and urgent, the way I sound when I'm standing over something that's both very expensive and very toxic. Code Phoenix. My location, ETA 4 minutes. The crunching stopped instantly. There was a dead silence on the line for a second. Dave's voice, when it came back, was stripped of all its usual laconic humor. It was all business. Sir, did you say Code Phoenix? That's affirmative, Dave, I said, turning to look at Carol's house. She was on her porch now, arms crossed, basking in the chaos she thought she was controlling. We have a level 3 airborne chemical contaminant, multiple residential structures affected. Hostile actor confirmed on site. I want the full kit. The full kit. Understood. Dave said. The sound of a chair scraping back came through the phone. I want lights, sirens, and the series. 8 positive pressure suits. I continued, my vision for the next 10 minutes crystallizing in my mind. And Dave? Sir? Bring the big truck, the really big one. A beat of silence, and then I could practically hear the grin in his voice. Understood, Commander. Squadron assembling. See you in 4. He hung up. Commander. He only called me that when we were on a serious job, or when he knew I was up to something wonderfully theatrical. I should probably explain Code Phoenix. It was a term we'd invented during a slow week over a case of beer. It was our internal designation for the absolute worst-case scenario, the kind of top-tier drop-everything-now emergency that we hoped we'd never have to respond to. We'd mapped out the protocol for it half as a joke, half as a serious preparedness drill. It was meant for a theoretical event, like a chemical plant explosion, a train derailment carrying toxic waste, or a small-scale zombie apocalypse. It's unofficial, and much more common. Use was as a code for make a ridiculously dramatic and overwhelmingly billable entrance to impress a high-value client. We'd used it once to secure a contract for a flooded casino, rolling in with so much gear the pit bosses thought we were a SWAT team. It had never ever been used for a suburban grudge match. Until now. I took a deep breath of the mercaptangent-laced air, a smell that, to me, smelled like opportunity. 4 minutes. The show was about to begin. While I was on the street, playing the part of the concerned citizen and quietly telling my immediate neighbors to get the hell out of their houses, a symphony of controlled chaos was erupting 10 minutes away at the Apex warehouse. I knew my crew. I knew the protocol. I could picture the entire scene in my head with perfect clarity. The call goes out from Dave. It's not a request. It's a summons. 3 other pagers go off simultaneously with the simple, ominous message. Code Phoenix. Warehouse. Now. First on the scene is Dave himself, my crew chief. Ex-Army logistics sergeant, built like a fire hydrant, with a salt and pepper flat-top haircut and a soul patch he thinks makes him look approachable. It doesn't. Dave finds deep spiritual comfort in checklists, laminated protocols, and overwhelming force. He believes that any problem can be solved with the correct application of process and tonnage. He has a tattoo of a biohazard symbol on his forearm that he got on a dare after our first big FEMA contract. He lives for moments like this. He would be at the main locker, pulling out the response binders, his face a mask of grim determination. Seconds later, Kevin skids into the parking lot in his souped-up Subaru. Kevin is our tech guy. He's a string bean of a man, perpetually caffeinated, with a brain that operates on a different frequency from most mortals. He can coax a signal out of a dead cell phone, hack a security system with a paperclip and a can-do attitude, and he treats our high-tech sensors with the kind of loving care most people reserve for a newborn baby. For Kevin, this isn't a crisis. It's a chance to collect unprecedented amounts of field data. He'd be making a beeline for the Pelican cases, the ones with the foam cutouts for the multi-gas detectors, the thermal imaging camera, and his personal baby. A custom-built sniffer drone with an array of chemical sensors on its undercarriage. And finally, Barry. Barry doesn't drive a Subaru. Barry drives a sensible minivan because he has 2 kids and a golden retriever. Barry is our muscle and our heart. He's a gentle giant of a man who used to be a bouncer at a biker bar, before deciding he wanted a job with better hours and less flying furniture. He's quiet, immensely strong, and so fiercely loyal he once tried to fight a forklift that he thought was looking at me funny. Barry's job is simple: carry the heavy stuff, look intimidating without trying, and be the calm center of the storm. He would be methodically loading rolls of our signature high-visibility tape, the bright yellow stuff with "Hazardous Zone, do not enter," printed in a font that screams, "We are not kidding," into the truck. They wouldn't be just putting on yellow coveralls. The Code Phoenix's protocol called for the top shelf. They were donning the Apex Series 8 CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear respirator suits. These things are the Lamborghinis of personal protective equipment. Fully enclosed, with a self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBA, pack, an internal cooling system, and a voice-activated radio communicator built into the helmet. They are ridiculously, hilariously over the top for a natural gas leak. They are also designed to be psychologically intimidating and look absolutely incredible on camera. They make you look less like a cleanup guy and more like you're about to step through a portal to fight aliens on another planet. And they weren't bringing a van. The protocol specified one vehicle, and one vehicle only: the Beast. The Beast is my pride and joy. It's a custom-built Freightliner M2 business class truck, the kind of thing that usually hauls refrigerated goods or armored cars. We'd had it retrofitted into a mobile command center and response unit. It's painted a menacing gloss black, so deep it seems to absorb light. On the side, the company logo, stylized silver phoenix rising from within a biohazard symbol, was rendered in 3M reflective vinyl. It's equipped with roof-mounted LED scene lights that can turn midnight into noon, a full suite of amber and white emergency strobes that are 100% legal for a licensed hazardous materials response company, and a multi-tone air horn that sounds like God clearing his throat in anger. Inside, it's a sterile, organized dream of stainless steel and labeled compartments, holding everything from decontamination showers to portable analysis labs. As I stood on my street, watching Carol preen on her porch, I knew what was happening. Dave was running his checklist. Kevin was calibrating his sensors. Barry was securing the last of the gear. They were climbing into the Beast, sealing their helmets, the hiss of the positive pressure seals echoing in the cavernous interior. Is bringing a truck capable of handling a tactical nuke to a suburban spat with an HOA president considered overkill? Yes. Yes, it is. But as I've often told my clients, there's no kill like overkill. And the HOA bylaws, for all their obsessive detail about the color of mailboxes and the number of finches allowed at a bird feeder, said nothing, and I mean nothing, about deploying a private, non-governmental hazardous materials tactical response unit to settle a score. Back on my street, the atmosphere was thick with more than just natural gas. There was confusion, a palpable sense of fear, and a growing buzz of neighborhood gossip. I'd managed to calmly but firmly evacuate my immediate neighbors, the Hendersons and the Garcias, telling them there was a significant gas leak and to please move to the end of the block until the authorities arrived. They'd seen the look on my face me on the job face and complied without question. A few other residents were now poking their heads out of their doors, drawn by the smell and the commotion. They were standing on their perfect lawns, phones in hand, pointing and whispering. And on her porch, the epicenter of it all, was Carol. She was watching the minor panic she had created with a look of supreme, unholy satisfaction. Her arms were crossed, a faint smirk playing on her lips. She thought this was her victory lap. She thought she was the one in control. She had no idea that she was no longer the director of this drama. The cavalry was coming. And my cavalry doesn't ride horses. It started as a sound, a distant, rising siren. But it wasn't the familiar hee-haw of a police car or the high-pitched wail of a fire engine. This was a deeper, more guttural howl, an electronic roar that seemed to vibrate in your chest. Then came the Horna series of 3 short, powerful blasts from an air horn that echoed off the beige houses. Bada-boom. Every head on the street turned. The whispering stopped. Carol's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. This wasn't part of her plan. And then it came into view. The Beast turned onto Maple Creek Drive, and it was like a scene from a blockbuster movie. It was moving slowly, majestically, its sheer size seeming to warp the cozy suburban dimensions of the street. The powerful scene lights mounted on its roof erupted, bathing the entire block in a brilliant, sterile white light that overpowered the gentle colors of the sunset. The dozens of amber and white emergency strobes flashed in a dizzying, rhythmic pattern, reflecting off the windows of the houses, the chrome bumpers of the minivans, and the stunned faces of my neighbors. It was a breathtaking, glorious, and utterly absurd spectacle. The truck's air brakes hissed as it came to a perfect, silent stop directly in front of my house, its massive form blocking the entire street. For a moment, nothing happened. The only sound was the hum of its diesel engine and the frantic strobing of the lights. Then, a side panel on the truck slid open with a pneumatic swoosh. A ramp extended to the ground, and one by one my squadron disembarked. First came Dave, then Kevin, then Barry. They were in the full, terrifyingly official-looking Series 8 CBRN suits. The setting sun glinted off their oversized helmet visors. Their movements weren't rushed or panicked. They were calm, practiced, and professional. They moved with the grim purpose of men who were about to walk into hell. They didn't just step off the truck, they deployed. The neighborhood fell completely silent. The confused neighbors were now stunned into immobility. Jaws were literally agape. On her porch, Carol's smugness had completely evaporated, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated bewilderment. She had no frame of reference for this. This did not compute in her world of bylaws and passive-aggressive notes. This was my cue. I pulled on my own Apex jacket, a dark blue affair with Apex, Scene Commander, stenciled in bold white letters across the back. I didn't need the full suit and helmet. I needed to be able to talk, to command, to direct the beautiful chaos I had unleashed. I strode forward to meet my crew as they assembled in a perfect line in front of me, the very picture of a highly trained response team. I clicked the transmit button on the professional-grade radio clipped to my jacket's shoulder strap, making sure the volume was turned up high enough for everyone to hear. "Squadron, establish a perimeter." I barked, my voice full of an authority I hadn't used since our last major incident. "I want a 200-foot exclusion zone. Kevin, get the multigas airborne. I want ppm readings every 10 feet, starting now. Barry, tape. I want this area locked down 60 seconds ago." Dave, his helmeted head turning to survey the scene, responded, his voice distorted and professional through his helmet's external speaker. "Copy, Commander. Perimeter being established." And just like that, it wasn't my lawn anymore. It wasn't Carol's kingdom. It was a hot zone. It was an active emergency site under the command of Apex Restoration. And Carol Peterson, HOA president, was no longer a smug tyrant celebrating a victory. She was just a confused civilian standing inside my freshly established, professionally managed, and soon-to-be exceedingly expensive, for her hazardous materials incident site. Let the games begin.